Hey guys, tonight we ease into something that feels simple on the surface, calm, but beneath it, there's often a surprising kind of fear. Have you ever noticed that? That moment before something changes when everything is still, yet your chest tightens. The quiet should bring comfort, but instead, it stirs something else. As if your nervous system is waiting for a storm. And maybe that's just it, been trained by a world of noise to feel unsafe when things go quiet. You've been told that the calm before change is just a pause before chaos. But what if it isn't? What if that pause is an invitation? You'll hear your thoughts more clearly in that stillness, and that can be unsettling. But it can also be where you begin to see. A gentle reminder before we begin: you will not be able to control the world, but you can learn to control yourself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere specific, maybe a city just going to sleep, or a quiet countryside already wrapped in darkness, drop your location and time in the comments. I love seeing how far these calm ripples reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are alone in a room that holds no threat. The air is still. The hum of distant traffic is muffled by the walls, and yet your body is alert. Your mind runs little loops, checking, analyzing, expecting. Why does this silence feel suspicious? You've experienced so much motion. The days blur in their rush. Even your rest is often rushed. Now, in this gentle pause, there's an unfamiliar weight, and you realize the calm feels unnatural not because it is wrong, but because you've forgotten how to be still within yourself. The Stoics spoke of this often, though rarely in those exact words. They spoke of inner freedom, the kind that can exist even in the middle of war or loss. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of a vast empire, wrote in his journal during battles and plagues, whispering truths to himself amid the noise. He reminded himself that the soul can remain untouched, like a lighthouse in fog, even when everything around it trembles. And here you are, in your own kind of fog, not of war perhaps, but of uncertainty. And it makes sense that calm feels unnerving, because in it, there's no enemy to fight, no problem to solve. There is only yourself. The truth is, we've learned to associate stillness with danger. In nature, silence often comes before a predator strikes, before a storm breaks. Maybe that instinct lives deep in your bones. Or maybe, more simply, you've become so used to scrambling that standing still feels like doing nothing. And nothing, you've been told, is failure. But what if stillness isn't empty? What if it's space? A paradox worth pondering. The calmer you become, the more intense your inner noise seems at first, as if your thoughts, once buried beneath motion, now take the stage. And that can feel overwhelming. But like a room that looks messy only because the lights were turned on, this isn't new chaos. It's just revealed. Pause here for a second. Notice your breath, not as something to control, but as something already happening. Inhale, exhale. The world doesn't need your management right now. It just needs you present. When things are quiet, your fears become louder. And that's okay. They rise up not to destroy you, but to be acknowledged, maybe even befriended. You don't have to believe everything they say. The Stoics taught, fear often speaks the language of anticipation. Not of now, but of what might be. And the present moment, this very breath, is far more manageable than the shadow of imagined futures. So you begin to watch your fear, not fight it. You say, "Ah, here you are again." And it softens, even slightly. There's an old story, possibly apocryphal, about a general who ordered his army to pause just before a major invasion. They were strong, ready, but he had them wait, just wait, not for weakness but to remember why they marched in the first place, because movement without clarity is wasted force. The calm, he believed, was a sharpening. You too can choose that calm, not as delay but as alignment. You lie there now not doing, just being, the room is still. And so are you, or nearly so. That flutter of restlessness is not failure. It's your nervous system asking, is it safe to let go? You don't need to answer with words. You answer with presence. This here is the beginning of change, not in a flash of lightning but in a quiet turning toward truth. And here's another small paradox to carry with you. The moment you stop running from your discomfort is the moment it begins to change. Even now, maybe a tiny part of you is loosening its grip. Maybe there's a little more space around your chest, around your thoughts. This stillness might not feel comfortable, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. In fact, it might be the most honest place you've been in all day. And as your body begins to soften into rest, your mind might still resist. Let it. You are not here to force sleep. You are here to remember how to be still. The calm is not the absence of movement. It's the readiness for real movement. The kind that comes from within. And when that change comes, because it will, you won't meet it frantically or with dread. You'll meet it like a friend who's been expected. Gently, openly, awake. The quiet lingers. Not just around you, but within you. And now you start to see something you hadn't noticed before. The mind is rarely quiet. Even when the world hushes down, it finds ways to keep spinning. Remember that time you turned off your phone, lit a candle, and promised yourself an hour of rest. And yet within minutes, your thoughts filled the space like water rushing into a vacuum. The mind craves noise. Not just sound, but movement. Narratives, predictions, problem solving, even suffering sometimes is more familiar than silence. You begin to notice how your thoughts stretch themselves, always in search of something to fix, something to revisit. Maybe a moment from earlier today. Maybe an imagined version of tomorrow. Maybe a version of yourself from 5 years ago, whispering regrets. There is rarely stillness inside your head, because stillness demands presence, and presence can feel strangely vulnerable. The Stoics would say this is the mind doing its job, but without discipline, it becomes the master instead of the servant. Epictetus warned against letting our judgments become automatic. He taught that external things are not the source of our suffering. Our interpretation of them is. A sharp word, a delay in plans, a broken glass. None of these disturb your peace unless you let them. And yet, when you sit in silence, it becomes clear how much interpretation is happening all the time, under the surface. Here's a subtle irony. Your mind would rather rehearse pain than surrender to peace. It feels more familiar, more controllable, even if it's exhausting. And so, you sit there in the stillness, and your thoughts leap from one ledge to another, refusing to land. You remember how, even as a child, moments of quiet often carried unease. A lull in conversation. A dark room after a story ended. Even then, your brain itched to fill the space, because silence can feel like exposure, like the curtain dropping on your performance. But maybe now you don't need to perform. Try something with me. Imagine each thought as a bird, some loud, some small, some frantic. They flap and dart through the sky of your awareness. You don't need to chase them, don't need to catch or shoo them away. Just lie back and watch them pass. You're not the bird, you're the sky. This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the inner guide. The part of you that is not your thoughts but the observer of your thoughts. The part that remains still even as everything else moves. When you live from that place, you stop reacting automatically. You begin to respond deliberately. This doesn't mean you become robotic or distant, quite the opposite. You feel more, not less. But you're not dragged by emotion anymore. You acknowledge it like a friend you know well. You say, "Ah, here's sadness again." Or, "Yes, this is fear." And you don't panic. You don't need to make them leave. There's a small historical detail from Seneca's life. Near the end of his years, he would take long, slow walks in the evening, even as his health was failing, even when Rome trembled with tension. Those walks weren't escapes. They were quiet hours where his thoughts were allowed to settle, like silt in water. And in that stillness, he'd reflect on mortality, on loss, on virtue, not with fear, but with focus. Maybe your own walk doesn't look so dramatic. Maybe it's just you, lying in bed, watching the ceiling fade into shadow. But the principle is the same. You're not trying to achieve a new feeling. You're just being with what is, without judgment, without resistance. Now here's another paradox. The more you try to silence your thoughts, the louder they become, like a child told to sit still. So don't shush them, don't scold them. Just widen your awareness. Let your thoughts drift by like leaves on a stream. You are not the leaves. You are the stream bed beneath, unmoved. A thought arises. What if things don't go as planned tomorrow? You answer not with panic, but with a stoic shrug. Then I will respond when that moment comes. Another thought. Why did I say that earlier today? And again, gently. The past cannot be edited, but I can learn, and I can let it go. This is not about becoming passive. It's about becoming selective with your energy. The Stoics didn't reject emotion, they rejected waste. Wasted sorrow, wasted rage, wasted anxiety over what cannot be helped. So as you lie here now, hearing the faint rhythm of your own breath, maybe you begin to realize the noise you feared in the calm wasn't from the world, it was from within. And now maybe it's quieting. The room hasn't changed. Your circumstances haven't magically resolved, but something subtle has shifted. You're no longer trying to chase your way into peace. You're allowing peace to emerge from the space you've made. And yes, the mind may still pull at you. That's okay. Like waves against a boat, it's not personal, it's just motion. You don't need to row harder, just stay seated. Trust the current. You are not failing by thinking. You are not failing by feeling. You are learning to sit beside your own mind without needing to fight it. That is the beginning of real mastery. And perhaps, for the first time in a while, the calm before change doesn't feel threatening. It feels earned. It feels like home. There is something oddly seductive about control. You reach for it without thinking, gripping tightly to plans, labels, even to the way others see you. You were taught early on that to feel safe is to be in control. And maybe for a time that was true. Structure brought safety. Discipline helped. Predictability gave you a sense of power. But slowly, subtly, control became a prison you couldn't quite name. Tonight, in this hush, you begin to see it. How much of your day is spent managing, not just tasks, but perceptions? How much of your mind is allocated to rehearsing conversations, predicting reactions, preparing responses to things that haven't even happened yet? There is an old Stoic truth that runs counter to the modern world. You control very little, and that's not a reason for despair. It's a reason to breathe. Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us and some things are not." That's the line, the sacred boundary. Your energy is meant to live on one side of that line and one side only. Yet you cross it again and again, usually without realizing. You try to control the behavior of someone you love so they don't hurt you. You try to control outcomes so your story feels like it's heading somewhere you can accept. You try to control how you're seen so your identity doesn't dissolve under someone else's misunderstanding. And yet none of those things are fully yours to hold. The Stoics would have you examine that, gently, like turning over a stone. Imagine this. You're standing in a river and the current is strong. You can fight it, plant your feet, brace against the water. Or you can wade in wisely, knowing the flow is not yours to command, only to navigate. The river doesn't care if you struggle. The river just flows. Control, when misused, becomes resistance to what is. And resistance is what turns pain into suffering. Tonight, lying there, maybe you recall a moment when you lost control, really lost it. A breakup, a diagnosis, a lost job. Something unexpected. Remember how your body reacted, how your mind spiraled. And then remember what happened after. You adjusted. Maybe not gracefully, maybe not quickly, but you adapted. You're here now. You survived that moment you once feared. The fear wasn't in the thing itself. It was in the loss of control. And here's the paradox of this section. The more you grip control, the more fragile you become. Like a tightrope walker clinging to an invisible line, every tremor threatens collapse. But when you loosen your grip, when you move with what is, you become fluid. And resilience is always born from fluidity, not rigidity. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we must be like the rock that the waves crash against, and still it stands. But he also reminded himself to be soft within, open to the lessons each wave brings. Not just enduring, but evolving. So tonight, you begin to practice the art of surrender, not of giving up, but of letting go where letting go is wise. You don't need to know how tomorrow will unfold. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need to manipulate outcomes to feel okay. You simply need to return to what is yours to govern, your response, your attitude, your alignment with virtue. Let's go even deeper. What if most of your stress isn't from what happened, but from your insistence that it shouldn't have happened, that things should have gone a different way, that people should have behaved differently? This is the quiet tyranny of should. The Stoics saw this clearly. Suffering often comes not from reality, but from our unwillingness to accept it. That doesn't mean you condone injustice or passively float through life, but it means you stop expecting the world to conform to your preferences. And when it doesn't, you respond from a place of inner steadiness, not from panic. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." You know this is true. Your thoughts race ahead, constructing tragedies, building futures that collapse before they're born, all in the name of staying one step ahead. But tonight, maybe you realize you don't need to be ahead. You just need to be here, still, soft, releasing the fantasy of control. Maybe someone hurt you, maybe something went wrong, maybe it's not fair, and yet it is what it is, and you can meet it fully without needing to wrestle it into something else. That's strength. You are not asked to erase your preferences. You're asked to hold them lightly, to know the difference between wanting something and needing to possess it to be okay. Tonight, you lie there and let the weight fall away. The weight of trying to be right, to be impressive, to be ahead of pain. What's left under all of that is something quieter, truer, a self that doesn't flinch at uncertainty because it knows it can meet whatever comes. Maybe you feel that self now. Maybe it's just beginning to stir. That inner governor who doesn't panic, who doesn't clutch, who says gently, "Let go of what isn't yours, come back to what is." And so the calm no longer feels like a threat. It feels like a clearing, a space where you don't need to manage or fix. Just be, just breathe, just return. It begins with a question you might not even notice at first. What happens if nothing happens? You've built so many of your hopes around outcomes, results, resolutions, achievements. You've grown up in a world that rewards movement, that praises completion, that measures value in deliverables. So naturally, you expect your peace to come wrapped in a bow. A new job, a clean answer, a healed relationship, a fixed self. But what if none of that arrives exactly how, or when you want it to? You lie there in this hush and the discomfort begins to settle in. This is the moment when the mind looks for something to wait for, a future reward, a turning point, a change that will make sense of this strange pause. Expectation becomes your placeholder for peace. You tell yourself, "Once I get there, then I'll feel okay." But here's where the Stoics whisper a different truth. Your peace cannot be postponed. Expectation, when clung to tightly, becomes a subtle form of suffering. It creates a gap between what is and what should be, and then you live inside that gap, forever reaching, never resting. The philosopher Cleans, one of the early leaders of Stoicism, was said to live with deep contentment, despite poverty and obscurity. He pulled water at night to earn wages and studied during the day. He did not resent his station because he didn't hinge his dignity on outcomes. He found purpose in effort, in presence, in now. And that's the paradox again, quietly knocking. When you give up your insistence that things go a certain way, you begin to see the fullness of what's already here. So tonight, as you lie in the stillness, you begin to let go of your timeline. You stop watching the clock of your life, waiting for it to reward you with clarity or success. Instead, you ask a different question. Can I be with this moment, even if it never resolves the way I hoped? At first, the answer might be no, and that's okay. But slowly, gently, you begin to loosen your grip on expectation. You remember the moments that surprised you, the times when life didn't go according to plan, and yet something beautiful emerged anyway. A failure that made room for growth, a detour that brought you somewhere more honest. Expectation had to die for truth to enter. It doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It means you stop attaching your peace to the realization of that dream. There's a strange kind of freedom in admitting you don't know how things will unfold, that you're not owed a certain ending, that you are not the author of every chapter, but you are the reader who gets to meet each sentence with curiosity instead of fear. You start to notice how much lighter that feels. You remember, it's not the not knowing that hurts. It's the expectation that you should know by now. The Stoics didn't reject planning. They just refused to worship it. They knew that clinging to the future is often just a refusal to face the present. So they chose presence. And with that came a strange and enduring joy. There's a story, possibly from Epictetus, about a man who lost everything: his possessions, his position, his place in society. And when others pitied him, he responded not with despair but with gratitude. "Now I have room," he said, "room for what mattered, room to see clearly. Your expectations are often old blueprints, drawn by younger versions of you in different seasons with different needs. And now here you are, different, quieter, maybe even wiser. So tonight maybe you pause long enough to ask, what would it mean to live without the promise of a result? Could effort itself be enough? Not effort for reward, but effort as alignment with who you are. That's what the Stoics mean by virtue, not reward-based morality, but consistent inner alignment. Doing what is right, not because of what it gets you, but because it is the only kind of peace that lasts. So you shift, you breathe, you stop needing this moment to lead to another one. You let it be its own destination. You remember how, sometimes, the best changes in your life came after you stopped trying to force them. After you let go of who you were supposed to be and started listening to who you already are. That's the change beneath the calm. Not a flash, not a breakthrough, but a quiet rearranging of your relationship to reality. You don't need this night to deliver a revelation. You don't need your thoughts to resolve themselves. You are not a riddle to solve. You are a life to witness. Expectation will try to pull you out of this moment again and again. Let it try. You'll meet it each time not with resistance, but with a soft return. A reminder you are not waiting, you are living, and that is more than enough. There are versions of you that no longer exist. Some of them lived with hope, some with fear. Some tried so hard to earn love. Some hardened themselves to avoid being hurt. All of them, those younger selves, built parts of the structure you stand on now. But tonight, in this quiet space, you begin to feel something unexpected. The ghosts of those past selves don't want to leave. You thought that moving forward meant progress, growth, change, and it does. But there's a strange grief that comes with it too. Letting go of who you were means letting something die, even if that something no longer serves you. And so, the calm before change feels like a small funeral for the identity you've outgrown. It's subtle but powerful. You might not even notice it at first, but when you're on the edge of transformation, something inside you hesitates. It whispers, wait, who will I be without this? Without this old story, this habit, this armor? The Stoics spoke often about death, not just the final breath, but the smaller deaths we encounter every day. The death of illusion, the death of reputation, the death of youth, and the death of the roles we've played for so long. And so tonight you begin to honor those past selves not as mistakes but as stepping stones. Each version of you was trying in its own way, trying to stay safe, trying to be seen, trying to belong. There's no need to judge them, just to acknowledge their purpose and release them. You might remember one of those moments now, a time when you changed your mind, your path, your heart. At the time it felt like chaos, maybe even failure. But looking back, you see it was clarity in disguise, the shedding of something false. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reminded himself again and again that all things are transient, including who we are. He wrote not to preserve a version of himself, but to witness it in motion. He let go of each thought as soon as it was written. That's why we still feel his presence. He didn't try to capture himself. He simply reflected. So tonight you reflect too. You ask, what am I holding onto that no longer fits? A title, a regret, a belief about who you're allowed to be. These past selves, even the wounded ones, don't need banishment. They need gratitude. A gentle nod, a soft goodbye. But here's the catch. Those identities often carry with them a sense of control. They are familiar, predictable. You know how to play their part. And stepping out of that means stepping into the unknown, into a quiet that feels like danger but might actually be freedom. The Stoics never said this would be easy. They only said it would be worth it. There's a curious detail in the life of Musonius Rufus, another Stoic teacher. He was exiled for speaking truth to power, not once but several times. And in those exiles he lost status, students, and stability. But in his letters there is no bitterness, only clarity. He didn't mourn the man he was forced to stop being. He found space to become more honest instead. Exile, he taught, was just a change of setting, not of self. And maybe tonight, in your own way, you are experiencing exile, a slow distancing from who you once were. And though no one sees it, though it's happening quietly inside you, it is just as real as a journey across seas. But remember, you are not erasing yourself. You are returning to something quieter, truer, beneath the noise of the person you had to become to survive. So you lie still. Let that version fade. Let it thank you. Let it leave. You might feel grief. That's okay. Change isn't always triumphant. Sometimes it's just gentle mourning for a self that tried hard and failed sometimes and carried a lot and loved in crooked, beautiful ways. You're not here to deny that past. You're here to evolve from it. Let's return to breath, not to control it, just to feel it. Inhale, exhale. This breath belongs to you, not to the self you were, not to the self you're becoming, just you right now. You're allowed to shift. You're allowed to outgrow. You're allowed to say, I loved that version of me, and now I let them go. That's not betrayal. That's progress. And the fear that arises when you approach change, that's just those old selves clinging to the edges of your identity, whispering, don't forget us. And you won't. You'll remember, but you won't carry them anymore. You'll carry only what fits, only what's true now. The calm isn't empty. It's full of your quiet transformation, and you're already in it. You wake day after day to a rhythm so practiced it no longer feels like choice. The alarm, the motions, the careful checklists, the way you speak to others, the way you speak to yourself. It's all smooth, familiar. Like a path walked so many times, the grass has forgotten how to grow there. But tonight, in this pause, you begin to sense something else beneath the surface of that routine. Not comfort, not ease, but something closer to dullness, a quiet erosion of presence. You didn't notice when it happened, how the things that once felt grounding became boundaries, how routine shifted from anchor to cage. You remember how, at first, the habits helped. They gave shape to chaos. They softened the overwhelm. They gave you something to lean on when everything felt uncertain, but slowly, subtly, they hardened. Now, when you reach for them, they no longer support you, they contain you. Like walls around a room that's grown too small. The Stoics would understand this. They prized consistency, but not stagnation. They practiced daily reflection not as a ritual, but as renewal. Every day they asked, am I living according to reason, according to nature, or just according to habit? Habit, when unconscious, becomes a kind of sleep, and you are not here to sleep through your life. So tonight, you ask yourself a difficult question. What in my life feels like it's moving, but is actually just spinning in place? There's a story about a soldier in Marcus Aurelius's time who trained every day with diligence, but never questioned the war he was preparing for. He lived by the hour, the repetition, the form. But when the call to battle came, he hesitated, because he had trained for the motion, not the meaning. And maybe, in your own way, you've done the same, woken up early, done the work, smiled when you were supposed to, pushed when things felt heavy, and yet, you've never quite paused to ask why or who you're doing all this for. That question, asked honestly, can be unsettling, because it points toward change. And change threatens structure, even if that structure is quietly hurting you. But tonight, something gentler is possible. You don't have to tear everything down, you just have to see. Just notice where your routines no longer serve your becoming, where they've grown brittle, where they repeat because you're afraid of what might rise in their absence. There's a paradox here. Structure brings peace, until it doesn't. The Stoics lived lives of rhythm. They woke early. They studied. They reflected, but they did not hide inside their systems. Their rituals were tools, not cages. Seneca once said, "Let us not waste our lives in vain pursuits." And sometimes vain pursuit isn't some grand, misguided ambition. Sometimes it's a daily loop that no longer aligns with your values, but persists because it's easy. That's the danger of comfort. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It numbs. And numbness masquerades as calm. But tonight, you know the difference. You lie here not in the false quiet of avoidance, but in the true stillness of awareness. You are watching, noticing, not judging, just noticing. What part of your day do you dread? What part do you move through without even feeling? What would happen if you let one of those loops go? At first, fear rises, the ego protests. Without that, who will I be? You will be new, not unfamiliar, just closer to yourself. The Stoics knew that growth was not always dramatic. Often it looked like small shifts, a question asked instead of assumed, a pause before reaction, a refusal to follow the script just because it's always been read. Tonight you begin to make room for something unscripted, a breath taken just because it feels good to breathe, a stretch not because it's part of your routine, but because your body asked for it. These are the cracks where your real self emerges, not the one performing consistency, the one who is present right now. So you don't have to burn your routines, you just have to wake up inside them. Notice the morning light instead of rushing past it, taste your food, listen fully, speak slower. Choose when to act instead of obeying automatic rhythms. Presence is not dramatic, but it is revolutionary, and slowly the cage begins to open. You realize that calm is not the absence of action, it's the absence of compulsion. You are allowed to move, to rest, to do things differently tomorrow, and as you lie here tonight, you don't have to plan what those changes will be. You just have to honor this awareness, this tiny spark of choice glowing quietly in your chest. It's not too late, it's not too early, it's just time to soften what's rigid, to listen to what's real, to walk the same path perhaps, but this time awake. The emotions rise like weather, sometimes subtle like a haze you can't quite name, other times sudden, lightning, wind, a wave crashing through your chest without warning. You lie here now and you notice something stirring inside. Maybe it's sadness, maybe anxiety, maybe a strange emptiness you can't define. And your first instinct is to label it, understand it, fix it. But what if you didn't? What if you treated this emotion not like a problem but like weather? Something passing, something beyond your control and yet not beyond your capacity to endure. The Stoics often described emotions this way, not as enemies but as natural occurrences. They taught that we cannot always stop them from arising, but we can learn not to be ruled by them. Tonight, you begin to practice that. You feel the emotion, not in theory but in your body. Maybe it's a pressure behind your eyes, a tightness in your throat, a slight trembling in your hands. You don't run from it. You don't try to interpret its entire meaning. You just stay, like a tree in the wind. There's a story about Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. He was once shipwrecked, losing all his possessions. He could have responded with despair, but instead he said that it was the best thing that ever happened to him. It led him to philosophy. He didn't deny his emotions. He accepted them. And in that acceptance, he found clarity. That's the Stoic way, not detachment in the cold sense, but detachment in the wise sense. The refusal to let passing storms uproot the foundation of your being. You don't control the arrival of emotion, but you control your relationship to it. So tonight, maybe you say to your fear, "You're here, I see you, but I don't have to become you." You say to your grief, "You're heavy, but you can sit beside me. I'm not sending you away." You say to your numbness even, "You're not nothing, you're a kind of armor, I'll sit with you too." No pushing, no fixing, just sitting. This is the quiet rebellion, refusing to panic in the face of feeling. When you do this, something subtle happens. The emotion begins to move, not disappear, but move. Like clouds drifting across a sky, you are no longer trapped inside it. You're watching it pass. That's the power of presence. And yet, there will be moments when your emotions feel too strong, when they seem to overtake your reason, your breath, your body. In those moments, remember this Stoic truth: you are more than what you feel. Your core, your ruling self, is untouched by the storm. It watches, it endures, it waits. And when you return to that center, everything becomes manageable. Not comfortable always, but manageable. Now let's come back to the body. Feel the places where emotion sits. Scan through gently, not to diagnose, just to notice. What's tight? What's restless? What's numb? And now ask, can I make just a little more room here? Not to release the feeling, but to hold it with more kindness. There's a paradox here, as always. The less you resist your emotions, the more they soften. Like a child who stops crying once they know they're safe. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be open. You need to know that no storm lasts forever, and that, even in the middle of one, you still have the capacity to choose how you meet it. The Stoics believed in choice. Not control of circumstances, but choice of response. Always that. So you lie here tonight, not avoiding your weather, but breathing beneath it. Maybe a wave of sadness moves through. That's okay. Let it rise, let it crest. Let it fall, you're still here. Maybe joy bubbles up unexpectedly, even. A warmth. A sweetness. Don't grasp at it. Just welcome it, like a bird landing briefly on your windowsill. All of it is passing. All of it is valid. None of it defines you. This is the practice. To feel without drowning, to witness without running, to breathe through what once would have broken you. And maybe now you understand. The calm before change is not the absence of emotion. It's the capacity to hold your emotion with grace. To know that you are not the storm. You are the witness. You are the sky. Somewhere inside you lives the urge to explain yourself, to make sure others understand your intentions, to clarify your actions, to prove your worth, your goodness, your pain, as if being misunderstood is something you can't quite tolerate. And yet, here in the quiet, you begin to see how much of your energy is spent trying to control perception, trying to manage how others see you, trying to rewrite their inner narratives, even when they've already made up their minds. You feel it in small moments, when someone misreads your silence as distance, when your kindness is mistaken for weakness, when your boundaries are met with disapproval. You feel it again when someone doesn't respond to your message, or worse, when they do respond but not how you hoped. The ache isn't always about rejection. Sometimes it's about being unseen. But the Stoics remind you of something radical and liberating. You are not responsible for being understood. You are responsible for being aligned with your values, your reason, your peace. What others perceive is theirs to carry. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste time thinking about what others think of you. You have no obligation to guess or to perform." He knew how heavy it is to live under the imagined gaze of others. Even as an emperor, he couldn't control their judgments, and neither can you. So tonight, you lie here and let go of that burden. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop planning how to explain, how to justify, how to defend. You just breathe. You just are. There's a strange paradox here once again. The more you try to control how others see you, the further you drift from your own center. But the moment you return to yourself, quiet, honest, rooted, you become unmistakably real. Not everyone will see that. Some will judge you through the lens of their own pain. Some will project their stories onto your silence. Some will misunderstand your withdrawal as disinterest, your boundaries as coldness, your truth as offense. Let them. You are not obligated to perform your identity for an audience that refuses to listen. You are not a mirror for their insecurity. You are not a vessel for their projections. You are your own witness. And the Stoics would ask, why chase the approval of others when your own soul sits waiting for your attention? Remember that philosopher Musonius Rufus. He taught that it is better to be despised while doing right than to be praised while compromising truth. That virtue shines brightest when no one is looking. that the noblest parts of us require no applause. You are allowed to be misunderstood. You are allowed to say nothing when others demand answers. You are allowed to stand still while the world demands movement. Tonight, you give yourself permission to let go of the performance, to set down the armor of explanation, to trust that those who truly see you will not need the whole story, and those who don't, no amount of clarity will change their mind. This is where freedom begins, not in being seen, but in being okay even when you are not. You start to notice how peaceful it feels when you stop mentally drafting explanations, when you stop defending your choices to invisible juries, when you simply rest in your own knowing. The calm before change isn't about saying the right thing or earning validation. It's about coming home to the part of you that no longer needs to be agreed with. It's a shedding, a soft but firm return to the truth that your dignity does not depend on consensus. And maybe, right now, there's someone in your life who doesn't understand you, someone who misreads your actions, someone who expects more than you can give. Can you let that be? Can you love without needing to be right? Can you walk away without needing to be vindicated? Can you remain silent without being cold? These are the quiet disciplines of the Stoic heart, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of self-respect. So tonight, you rest in that. You lie there without explanation. You stop editing your narrative for the sake of others' approval. You stop performing. You stop persuading. You stop apologizing for being exactly where you are. And from that place of stillness, something opens. Not a shout, not a breakthrough, just a soft, steady voice inside you saying, you are enough even if they don't see it, even if no one claps, even if no one understands. Even if your truth stands quietly in the corner while the world applauds something louder, you are not here to be seen. You are here to be real. You've tried to let go before, of pain, of resentment, of a version of the past that clings like a shadow, and each time you thought letting go would feel like release, like wind rushing in, like a clear sky after rain, but often it didn't feel like that at all. Letting go in real life feels like loss, like absence, like silence where once there was noise, even if that noise was chaotic, even if it hurt, because what we hold onto, even the hard things, gives us a shape. And when we open our hands, even for healing, we're left unsure of what to hold next. Tonight, as the world softens around you, you feel it. That old hurt, that name, that memory, that regret. You thought you had moved past it. Maybe you did, but healing isn't a straight line. It circles back. It asks gently, are you ready now to loosen this even more? The Stoics had no illusions about how hard this work is. They taught that holding on is often our first instinct, but that wisdom lives in knowing when to let the weight fall. They didn't ask for denial. They asked for clarity. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." And the deepest kind of bravery is not just facing danger, but facing yourself. The parts of you that still grip pain like a shield, that still replay conversations that ended years ago, that still long for an apology that may never come. The Stoics would ask, is it truly yours, this pain, this burden? Or have you simply carried it so long it feels like a part of you? And if you can't answer right away, that's okay. Letting go doesn't happen in a single breath. It happens across many nights like this one. In the hush, in the stillness, in the moments where you notice the space that grief has occupied, and you consider, gently, what else could live there. You may find that the thing you've held onto wasn't even about the other person or the past. It was about who you were when it happened, how small you felt, how unworthy, how helpless. So tonight, maybe you don't just release the memory. Maybe you release that version of you, the one who didn't know better, the one who tried their best, the one who needed love and didn't always get it. Let them go too, not because they were wrong, but because you no longer need to live from that place. Letting go is not forgetting. It's not pretending. It's simply refusing to carry what no longer serves your becoming. You might feel resistance even now. That's normal. The mind will tell you, but if I let go, then what happened won't matter. Then I won't be safe. Then they'll get away with it. But you're not letting go for them. You're letting go for you. because the cost of holding on is too high, because bitterness burns from the inside, because pain, when rehearsed too long, becomes identity, and you are not here to be defined by your wounds. You are here to be whole, so take a breath. Feel that thing again, not to relive it but to acknowledge it. Then say gently, "You've taught me what you came to teach. Now you may go. If the emotion rises, let it. It means you're moving. Not away from yourself, but deeper into yourself. Into the part that knows freedom isn't something you stumble into, it's something you choose, quietly, repeatedly." The Stoics weren't stoic because they didn't feel. They were stoic because they knew what not to feed. And pain, when fed too long, becomes who you think you are. You are not your pain. You are not your mistakes. You are not the version of you that others misunderstood. You are this breath, this presence, this quiet return. Letting go is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. And some days you'll pick the burden back up again. That's okay. Just don't make a home in it. Tonight, you choose to put it down again. Even if only for now. Even if only until morning. Because each time you do, you build trust with yourself. You say, "I can be okay without this." And eventually you will be, truly, fully, quietly, okay. You spend so much of your life trying to prove that you're enough. It begins so early. Someone praises you for being helpful, smart, quiet, strong. And you learn that love, or at least approval, is something you must earn. So you chase it, with grades, with kindness, with self-sacrifice, with silence. You learn to become what others need even when it costs you something unseen. And somewhere along the way you forget to ask, "What do I need?" Tonight, in this quiet moment, you return to that question. Not to answer it all at once, but to finally allow it to exist. What do you need? Not to impress, not to achieve, not to be accepted, but to be whole. The Stoics would smile here, because while they championed discipline, they were also fierce defenders of self-respect. They taught that a life lived for others' applause is not a life at all, it is performance. And performance is exhausting. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "It is not the opinion of others that matters, but your own integrity." Not because others' views don't hurt, they do, but because living for them is a losing game. You already know this. You've lived through the nights of overthinking, replaying conversations, wondering if you were too much or not enough. You've changed your tone, your timing, your truth, just to fit. And still, it was never quite right. So tonight you stop. Not out of anger, not out of rebellion, out of love for yourself. You ask again, what if I am already enough? Not when I succeed, not when I'm understood, but now, quietly, as I am, you're allowed to want growth. But growth doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means uncovering the self you buried under layers of performance. You begin to feel that now. The self that doesn't strive to be impressive, only honest. The self that doesn't chase approval, only alignment. The self that doesn't bend in every wind but stands softly rooted. This isn't arrogance, it's clarity. There's a story, maybe more legend than history, about Epictetus. He was born into slavery, had no wealth, no social power, and yet his teachings shaped generations, because he didn't try to impress, he simply lived his philosophy, steady, sincere, enough. He taught that your dignity cannot be granted by others, so it cannot be taken away by them either. It's yours, always was, even when you forgot, even when you shaped yourself into something small just to be held, even when you believed that love required shrinking. It doesn't. Love, true love, whether from others or from yourself, asks only this: be real. And sometimes being real means disappointing people, not answering texts right away, saying no, leaving a path that no longer makes sense, making peace with being misunderstood. And yes, there will be grief. The part of you that learned to survive by pleasing others will grieve that lost identity. But what rises in its place is something unshakable. That's the calm you begin to feel now. Not the calm of absence, but the calm of return, of coming home to yourself. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be healed. You don't have to be inspiring. You just have to be. That is enough. You lie here, and for the first time in a long while, you let that truth settle deeper than your fear. Maybe there's still tension in your chest. Maybe a voice inside says, but what if they don't like this version of me? And that voice is allowed to speak, but it does not get to lead. You are led now by something steadier. Not ego, not fear, but truth, your truth, small and quiet, but very much alive. The Stoics would tell you, peace does not come from victory, it comes from self-governance, from living as though your worth is not up for negotiation. And so, tonight, you negotiate no more. You return to your breath, to your body, to the soft, steady reminder you are already enough. No more proving, just being. There's a strange discomfort in doing nothing. When you're still, the mind starts pacing. It nudges you, shouldn't you be improving, fixing something, planning your next step? Even here in the quiet of night, the impulse persists, to optimize rest, to earn stillness, to make use of every second. But the Stoics would remind you, being is not a waste of time. Silence is not emptiness. It's where the deepest recalibration begins. Tonight, you're not here to perform rest. You're here to inhabit it, to notice the spaces you usually skip over, the ones between decisions, between tasks, between thoughts, the pauses that modern life teaches you to fear, but that ancient wisdom invites you to cherish. Seneca wrote often about time, not in hours or days, but in presence. He believed that most people exist as if life is endless, postponing joy, delaying reflection, racing forward. But the wise live as if time is already enough, because it is. You've been conditioned to believe that value lies in motion. But motion is not the same as progress. A hamster wheel spins fast but goes nowhere. So ask yourself gently, what would it mean to stop striving, not forever but just for now? To stop folding your worth into productivity? To stop believing you must deserve peace before you can feel it? Stillness is not the absence of purpose. It is the purpose. Even the great Marcus Aurelius, in the middle of ruling an empire, would stop to write himself back into presence. In his journal, he reminded himself to pause, to return to breath, to honor the simplicity of being alive. He had armies, advisors, constant crises, but he also had silence, because he made room for it. You can too. Tonight, you don't need to do anything extraordinary. You don't need a breakthrough. You don't need to heal all at once. You just need to lie here, to notice your body, the weight of it against the bed, the way your chest rises and falls without your help, the quiet thrum of life moving through you, asking for nothing but your attention. When you pause long enough, you begin to see, there is no moment more important than this one, because this is the only one you truly have. Everything else is memory or imagination, and neither needs to be solved tonight. The Stoics taught that control begins with what's here, what's now. You don't govern the future. You don't rewrite the past, but you do choose your posture in this breath. So what posture do you take? Not your physical one, though that matters too, but your internal stance. Do you meet this moment with tension or with trust? You've spent so long bracing against life, waiting for the next demand, the next twist, the next disappointment. But here's a radical invitation. What if nothing is required of you right now? Nothing. Just being, not fixing, not preparing. Just resting inside this quiet. And it might feel strange, even unsafe, because effort has become your way of feeling worthy. And rest, real rest, asks you to believe that your worth is not conditional. That's hard, but it's possible. It begins now. With each breath, you surrender a little more. You stop performing calm. You become calm. And when your thoughts try to pull you into planning, gently say, not now. When your mind replays a worry, respond, not tonight. Not in rejection, just in redirection. This moment is your sanctuary, not because it's free of thought, but because you choose not to follow every thought that arises. You are not abandoning your life. You are returning to it, fully, here. The Stoics knew that we lose ourselves not in catastrophe, but in noise. And that silence, chosen, welcomed, embraced, is how we find our way back. So tonight, in your stillness, you become more alive, not less. You don't need a reason. You don't need a goal. You just need this breath. And then the next. One quiet moment at a time. You're already doing it. You're already here. There's a part of you that wants to know the outcome before you act. You hesitate before making choices. You weigh every path not only for what it offers, but for how it will be perceived, how safe it is, how certain the reward. You want a guarantee. You want to step only when the ground beneath is solid and mapped and known. But life doesn't work that way, and deep down you know it. The Stoics never promised certainty. In fact, they warned against it. They knew that the pursuit of total control over outcomes is a silent form of suffering. Because in reality, we own nothing beyond our own reason, our own virtue, our own effort. Epictetus reminded his students, "Do not ask things to happen as you wish. Wish for them to happen as they do, and you will find peace." That's not passivity, it's presence. And tonight, that's what you practice. You lie here with the unknown. You let it sit beside you without demand. You stop trying to force life into a shape it doesn't want to take. You stop begging certainty for peace. Instead, you ask, what if peace is available without knowing what comes next? It's a scary question, because uncertainty feels like a threat, a loss of control. But the Stoics would gently challenge that idea. They would say that the future has always been uncertain, that what scares you now is not the uncertainty itself, but the sudden awareness of it. You never really had control, you just had the illusion. And tonight, you're brave enough to let that illusion go. There's a strange comfort in surrender, not giving up, but giving in to the current of what is, not fighting the river, not building dams in your mind, just floating for a while, eyes open, trusting the direction. You might remember a time when things didn't go to plan, and yet somehow what came after was exactly what you needed, not what you expected, but something better, or deeper, or truer. And you remember thinking, thank God I didn't get what I thought I wanted. That's the quiet gift of surrender. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate. Not merely acceptance of what is, but a deep appreciation for the wisdom hidden inside it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. You are not here to predict life. You are here to meet it honestly, humbly, moment by moment. And right now, life asks nothing of you except to be here, to feel the uncertainty without fleeing it, to stop demanding answers from a future that isn't ready to speak yet. This is the paradox. When you stop needing guarantees, you begin to live more freely. You stop rehearsing conversations. You stop bracing for disappointment. You begin to trust yourself, not the path, but your capacity to walk it. That's the real confidence. Not that everything will go well, but that you will respond with strength and clarity no matter what arises. Tonight you practice this trust. You say, I don't know what's coming, but I know I'll meet it awake. I know I'll meet it with kindness. I know I'll meet it with courage. And if I fall, I'll rise. If I lose, I'll learn. If I grieve, I'll heal. The Stoics never sought a life without pain. They sought a life without self-deception. A life where you no longer delay living until things are safe. A life where you stop waiting for certainty and begin dancing with possibility. That's the life you choose tonight. You lie here, the future still unknown. But for the first time in a while, that doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like an invitation, like the first page of a book you haven't read yet. And you don't need to skip ahead. You're allowed to savor this moment, to rest in the unknowing, to fall asleep not with answers but with peace. Because peace was never in the plan, it was in the presence, and you're already here. You've been told to chase greatness, to rise, to stand out, to make your mark before time runs out. And so you push, you compare, you wonder if you're doing enough, being enough, becoming enough. But tonight in this hush, something softer begins to unfold. A question almost too quiet to hear. What if the point isn't greatness, but groundedness? The Stoics never chased fame. They saw it as a trap, a thing that depends not on your character but on others' opinions. They saw how quickly applause turns to silence, how easily legacy becomes noise. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the most powerful empire of his time, wrote in his private journal, "Fame is a hollow echo. Live well, not loudly." So tonight, you lie here, not to plot your next achievement, but to remember that your worth was never tied to your visibility. You are not here to impress the world. You are here to inhabit your truth, and truth rarely shouts. It whispers in your smallest choices, in how you speak to a stranger, in how you forgive, in how you rest without guilt. You've seen how the world glorifies hustle, how it measures value in output, speed, recognition. But the Stoics remind you that meaning is not found in being the fastest or the loudest, but in being aligned with reason, with nature, with peace. So ask yourself, who am I when no one's watching? Do I act from principle or from performance? Do I choose presence or approval? Do I live quietly but fully? These are the real measures. There's a story about Cleans, a Stoic philosopher who worked as a water carrier at night to fund his studies. People mocked him, called him foolish. But he didn't flinch. He knew who he was. He didn't need recognition to validate his path. And you don't either. You don't need to be remarkable to be meaningful. You don't need to be celebrated to be whole. You just need to live in truth, whatever that looks like for you. Tonight you return to that truth, gently, without needing to prove it to anyone. You let go of the fantasy of being known. You let go of the urgency to do something big. You remember that stillness is its own kind of depth. You remember that a life of quiet purpose is no less worthy than a life of loud success. The oak tree does not strive to be noticed. It grows slowly, steadily, deeply, and that is enough. So much of your anxiety comes from trying to live at someone else's pace, to measure your life by someone else's milestones. But the Stoics taught that your path is yours alone. That comparison is a thief, not only of joy, but of clarity. You lie here and you feel it now, the subtle weight of comparison lifting, the quiet returning. You don't have to rush. You don't have to win. You don't have to dazzle. You just have to keep moving with intention, with honesty, with care. There's freedom in that. And the paradox, as always, is this. The moment you stop chasing greatness, you begin to feel truly alive, because greatness was never about being remembered. It was about being real. You're allowed to want things. You're allowed to grow, but let it be from love, not lack. Let it be from fullness, not fear. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're simply unfolding at your own pace, and that is enough. It's strange how hard it is to receive, to accept kindness without deflecting, to sit in silence without trying to fill it, to let love in without bracing for its loss. There's a part of you that trusts giving more than receiving. Giving feels active. Giving feels safe. Giving feels like control. But receiving, that's vulnerable. It asks you to soften. It asks you to trust. And that's harder than it seems. Tonight, you lie here and begin to notice the places where you tense against life's gentleness, where you dismiss compliments, where you downplay your needs, where you hold your breath in moments meant to nourish you. Why? The Stoics were often misread as cold, detached, unaffected. But in truth, their philosophy wasn't about resisting emotion. It was about filtering what truly matters. They believed in joy, in connection, in beauty. But they also knew that receiving those things fully requires a strong inner core, a self that doesn't collapse under praise and doesn't crumble under loss. Seneca once wrote, "We must learn to receive fortune with grace, whether she gives or takes." Tonight you begin to practice that. To receive, not just the good but the uncertainty, not just the praise but the silence after. You lie here and you feel the breath entering your body, and for once you don't force the exhale. You just receive the inhale. Let it fill you. Let it stay. Let it remind you that life is always offering something, whether or not you notice. So ask yourself now, quietly, what am I resisting that's trying to reach me? It might be rest. It might be help. It might be peace. You've grown used to doing everything alone. And you're capable, yes, but capability isn't the same as freedom. Sometimes strength is knowing when to stop. Sometimes freedom is saying, I need, not in weakness but in honesty. This is where Stoicism meets softness. It's not about armoring up. It's about knowing when to open, when to trust, when to allow the world to move toward you. You think of a time when someone offered you love and you hesitated. Maybe you smiled politely, but inside you doubted. You thought, why me? What do they want? What if I lose this? But what if there's nothing to lose? What if the love that's meant for you isn't fragile? What if your only job is to stay open long enough to feel it? You are not a problem to solve. You are a vessel to fill with care, with connection, with stillness. But a vessel must open to be filled. Tonight you practice opening, just a little. You let in the quiet. You let in the safety of this moment. You let in the possibility that you don't have to earn rest, that you don't have to apologize for being held. The Stoics didn't flinch from hardship, but they also didn't flinch from joy. They knew that both are part of nature. And nature is not something to resist, it's something to align with. So maybe you imagine now a stream flowing. You don't force it, you don't fight it. You simply step in and let it carry you. That's what receiving feels like. Trusting the current, not trying to control the speed, just floating, arms loose, heart soft. It might feel unnatural at first, but your soul remembers, and it smiles even now as you begin to surrender the grip. You are safe here. You are allowed to relax your defenses. You are allowed to feel good without guilt, to let go of the edge, to lean back, to let it in. There's something you've been waiting for, a moment, a sign, a shift, some confirmation that it's time, time to act, time to move forward, time to become who you were always meant to be. But that moment never arrives quite how you imagined, because change doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper, a subtle easing, a space where fear once lived, a breath you didn't know you'd been holding. And when that moment comes, it doesn't feel like clarity, it feels like quiet. That's what tonight holds. Not an answer, but the absence of needing one. Not a breakthrough, but a soft acceptance that you're already becoming. You've spent so long bracing, preparing, doubting. And yet here you are, still breathing, still healing, still capable of peace even in the waiting. The Stoics didn't see change as dramatic or sudden. They saw it as incremental, a practice, a slow shaping of the soul through choice after quiet choice. They didn't wait for the right time. They made this time right by how they lived inside it. And so do you. Maybe you've been waiting for motivation, or permission, or a guarantee. But the truth is, nothing changes until you choose to soften where you once tensed, to open where you once closed, to begin where you once waited. Right now, in this quiet moment, you can feel it. Not urgency, but readiness. Not pressure, but presence. The world might not see it, but inside, something is shifting. You're no longer trying to become someone else. You're simply remembering who you are. The storm has passed, or maybe it hasn't. But either way, you are no longer flinching from the wind. You are standing still, and in that stillness you are becoming solid, not rigid, not cold, just rooted, rooted in values that no one can take, in calm that no circumstance can steal, in a freedom that's born not from getting what you want, but from wanting only what aligns with your truth. And maybe now the question isn't when will things change. Maybe the question is, how do I hold myself while they don't? The Stoics would smile here, because that's the real measure, not how much you achieve, but how gracefully you endure. Not how quickly you arrive, but how patiently you walk. So tonight, let the waiting go. Let the urgency go. Let the idea of finally becoming dissolve. You are not on trial, you are on a path. And every breath you take in presence is progress. You close your eyes and you don't beg for transformation. You just listen to the quiet rhythm of your own becoming, to the steady pulse of a life no longer lived for performance but for peace. You feel the difference, the softening, the steadiness, and finally the slowing. As the story draws toward its close, you don't feel the need to rush. You allow the quiet to expand, to hold you. This is what the calm before change has always been, not an empty pause but a sacred threshold. And you have crossed it. You did not need to leap, you just had to stop running. Now, let the story fade, let the body soften, let the thoughts dissolve like mist on morning glass. You've done enough, you are enough. Let go, rest. The room is still now, your body knows what to do, you don't need to think anymore. Not tonight, the mind can loosen its grip, the story can fade into the background. There's no task waiting, no next step, just this, breath, quiet, warmth. You lie here gently surrounded by your own presence, and that's more than enough. You are safe, you are held, you are okay, even if things are unfinished, even if tomorrow brings questions. This moment is whole. Let the weight of trying roll off your shoulders. Let the spine melt into the bed. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands open. This is your permission to feel tired, not as weakness but as wisdom. This is your invitation to stop holding it all, not forever, just for now. Let the images of the day drift away like leaves on a river. You don't need to catch them, just watch them float by. Softly, slowly, the light inside your chest dims into a gentle hum. You are home now, not in a place but in your own stillness. And if the world feels far away, that's okay. This moment is yours. No demands, no performance.